It's the 24th. The mortgage cleared last week and you're checking the account balance in the car before you walk into the grocery store. 1 in 4 Canadian families doing exactly that calculation. On an average household income, keeping that roof means more than 100 days of work every year before anything else has a chance to cost them. Most of them have no idea that number has a name. So, are you house poor? There's a quick way to find out. If your housing costs, mortgage, property taxes, insurance, utilities take more than 30% of your gross income, you're in that zone. That's the threshold of the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation uses to define housing stress. But the number isn't the real danger. The real danger is what happens to your family when you live inside that number for months without ever naming it. I spent years working in social services watching family navigate the financial stress. The pattern I kept seeing wasn't about the math. It was about the silence around the math. Today I'm going to walk you through 5 signs, starting with the one you can check right now, ending with the one that does the most quiet damage. Sign 4 is the one that hits closest to home, and it has nothing to do with your credit card balance, your mortgage rate, or your grocery bill. I'll get there, but I need to show you signs 1 and 2 first, because they're what makes sign 4 possible.
And the first sign is the one you can measure in the next 60 seconds. Open your banking app. Find your last full month of housing costs, mortgage payment, property tax, insurance, heating. Add those up, then divide your monthly take-home pay. If that number is above 30%, you've crossed the CMHC housing stress threshold. On a household income of $90,000 a year, that's roughly $2,250 a month going to housing alone.
Most families have never run this calculation, not because they are bad with money, because nobody gave them a number to check against. Okay, real talk, I have never heard of the CMHC threshold until I was already inside it. That's how these things work. The reference point shows up after the damage is done. But the calculation alone doesn't show you everything. Sign 2 is behavioral, and it often shows up before families run the math at all. It's the slow disappearance of small things. Not a dramatic cut, but a quiet one. The swimming lessons that didn't get you renewed this fall, the piano classes you told yourself you'd restart later, the summer road trip that became a staycation without a real family conversation about why. This is how house poor actually feels from the inside. Not like a financial crisis, like a series of small adjustments that each seems completely reasonable in the moment. I catch myself doing the mental math on future costs for my kid, whether we'll be able to say yes when the time comes. When that calculation starts running without you choosing to run it, that is sign 2. Signs 3, 4, and 5 get progressively harder to admit. Stick with me because sign 4 is the one I promised you at the start. Signs 1 and 2 are visible. What's underneath them is where it gets harder to see.
Sign 3 is when credit stops being a tool and starts being a flow. It looks like this. The mortgage comes out on the 1st, 2 days before you move money from your line of credit to make sure the account has enough. Or the credit card carries a balance that doesn't fully clear at the end of the month, not because of a big purchase, but because the month ran out of income before it ran out of expenses. Equifax Canada reported a 30% annualized increase in severe mortgage delinquencies in the 4th quarter of 2025. Those aren't people who stopped caring. Those are people who ran out of room to float.
There's no shame in recognizing this, but there's a cost to not naming it. And now, sign 4, the one I mentioned at the top. Sign 4 is this: family activities have disappeared from your life, and you can't point a single conversation where you decided to stop them. They just stopped because your brain quietly removed them from the category of available options. Your brain didn't make a choice, it just stopped putting certain things on the table. That process has a name in behavioral economics. It's called option contraction. When financial resources feel tight, the brain pre-filters what's even worth considering. You don't decide against the trip to the science museum. It never becomes a decision at all. If you watch my mortgage renewal video, you know the 4-step negotiation playbook. But what if you already signed at the new rate and you're living with the impact now? That's exactly where sign 4 operates. In my work in social services, I watched this happen to families who were doing everything right. The activities don't get canceled with a conversation. They just stop appearing on the list of options anyone considers. A few weeks ago, my partner asked what we want to do on a Saturday. I realized I hadn't even thought of a restaurant, not decided against it. It wasn't on the list I was scanning, and I recognized exactly what that was. I explained option contraction to families for years. That Saturday, I was living it. And that's the thing about financial pressure over time. It doesn't just change what you spend, equally it is what your brain allows you to imagine. And most families never notice the it is happening. Sign 5 is relational, and in my work in social services, it's the one that compounds the hardest. Sign 5 is not avoiding the money conversation with your partner because you don't want to deal with it. It's avoiding it because you don't have a solution to bring to the table, and showing up without a solution feels like showing up as the problem. Between you and me, that's one of the most isolating places a parent can be. You're trying to protect your family from the stress, so you absorb it alone. And the more you absorb it alone, the heavier it gets. FP Canada's 2025 research found that 52% of Canadians feel paralyzed by financial decisions because they're afraid of making the wrong move. That paralysis doesn't stay in your head, it lands in your relationship. You don't need to have solved the problem to have the conversation, but the silence, that's sign 5. 5 signs. You might recognize one, you might recognize all 5. Either way, here's what actually matters. House poor is a diagnosis, not an identity. And a diagnosis as a treatment plan. What do you actually do with this? Step 1 is the one most financial advice skips because it sounds too simple. Name it. Run the calculation, monthly net income times 30%. Write the number down on paper or in your phone, somewhere you can look at it and say, this is the phase I'm in right now. Not forever, right now. Naming it breaks the silence that makes sign 5 possible. It also makes step 2 and 3 possible, because the problem isn't real until you say it out loud, even just to yourself.
Step 2 is about finding the biggest leak outside of housing. Most families who are house poor have already cut the obvious things. The streaming services they remembered, the subscription they noticed. What they haven't looked at carefully is the second tier. The car loan that made sense 3 years ago. The insurance bundle that never got reviewed after you renew it automatically. The telecom package that crept up $15 a month and nobody caught it. One recurring expense identified and reduced buys you breathing room. That's the goal of step 2.
I'm not going to tell you to cut restaurant budget because if you're in sign 4, it's already gone. The real work is in the expenses that are still automatic. And step 3 is the one that makes the other two sustainable. Create an horizon. When is your next mortgage renewal? When does the car loan end? Is there a salary review, a mat leave ending, a change you can reasonably plan around in the next 12 to 18 months? House poor within 18-month horizon is manageable. Without a horizon, the same financial situation produces a completely different psychological experience. Scarcity thinking doesn't respond to math, it responds to time. I started rebuilding after a financial shock with $50 a month. It felt almost meaningless at the time. It wasn't. I'll share that full story in an upcoming video because it's the next logical step from where we are today. House poor isn't a judgment. It's a phase that a lot of Canadian families are navigating right now, especially after the renewal wave of the last 18 months. 5 signs, a calculation you can run tonight. One leak to find, one horizon to set. If this video described your situation, drop your housing cost percentage in the comments. No judgment, just numbers. You might be surprised how many families are in the exact same place. If this kind of content is useful, subscribe. Every week I break down another piece of the financial pictures for families managing tight budgets. And if you haven't watched the mortgage renewal video yet, that's the one I'd watch next. It covers negotiation playbook I wish I'd used the first time we renewed. Keep living frugal, stay free.